Hi, I'm Mia Dambach, and I work for Child Identity Protection, which is a newly established NGO based in Geneva. I started practicing as a lawyer, a children's lawyer in Australia, before moving over here to Geneva almost 20 years ago now, so quite old. And I've been working on children's rights all my life. So when I studied law in Australia, I was working, it was at the University of Sydney. And at the University of Sydney, I can say that doing law, 90% of everybody was doing commercial law, making lots of money. But there was a small percentage of us that really wanted to work on, and they even called it the alternative lawyers, but to save the world and to do something more than just making money, but to use law to help the most impoverished or those that need it most, to speak up for the vulnerable. And I think that that's something that has always been my goal, is to help those that can't speak up for themselves necessarily, especially children. So I worked as a children's lawyer. And then when I got married to a Swiss, there was no way that my French was good enough to work in a Swiss court. So I said, okay, well, then I'll do international law. And that's how, but international, working on children's rights. So that's always been my passion, and that's why I'm here. So for me, I think the most pressing issues are giving children an opportunity to be raised in a loving and stable family environment, and to help them to understand what their identity rights are in that context. And to do that, children need to have a birth certificate. And despite that, over 260 million children in the world don't have a birth certificate. But it's more than just having a legal identity for these children. Children also need to know about the facts on that birth certificate. So where were they born? That can also contribute to their culture, to their traditions, other things other than really so fundamental to them, to their existence, is where do I come from? That's linked to place of birth that I just said, but also my family relations. And in many, many countries, and even the things that we've been speaking about at our conference today, children don't know how they were born. They don't have information about who their parents are. They don't have information about their genetic makeup. There's 8 million children in 2019 that were born through third-party reproduction. We've got surrogacy. So there are so many children that are missing these fundamental parts of information. I get it. It's not the most pressing issue that's on the screens of the world. Like, children are starving, children are being exploited. But there is no hierarchy in children's rights. And these rights are very, very important to children, and especially when they're growing up and they're asking questions about who am I? Who am I helps where I'm going. And so I think it's very important. So if I look back at working on children's rights now for over 2 decades, and especially in an international context, I think whatever is a tough issue is also an opportunity. And what we have in this sector, in this development sector, are lots of passionate and dedicated people. And you also have lots of passionate and dedicated organizations, whether it be from the UN, whether it be international organizations, and everybody's coming to tackle these issues from a different angle. So one of the challenges is getting everybody aligned and having some consensus on the way forward. And that can be difficult, especially in an international context. So trying to negotiate texts, trying to negotiate guidelines, trying to negotiate any type of project in a multilateral or multidisciplinary setting can be challenging, but that's the richness of that type of a project. And so while it has been challenging, and I can give an example, I remember we were working on a massive open online course with Harvard University, and we had 10 international organizations already committed to this project. And there was one, it was a main organization. The lady said to me, Mia, have you had any humanitarian field experience on this project? And I said, no, I haven't. She said, well, it's never going to work. It's not going to be useful. But that was just one person representing a 10,000, 100,000 person organization. And because she had said no, then I thought, that project was going to be really hopeless and that it wasn't going to go anywhere. And in the end, I have to say that project with Harvard had over 40,000 people do the massive open online course, very successful, French, English, Spanish, and Arabic. And that's one of these lessons that just because one person doesn't agree with the initiative, you have to go bigger and you have to look at different ways to build as many synergies as possible, because in the end, the reason why we're doing some of these projects, it's not about a person. It's not about an organization. It's about the cause. It's about children's rights and it's about protecting them. And so in these emergency settings, I really do believe that this massive open online course has been so beneficial. And if you look at the way people on the field have said how it's helped them, they can do it when they have time. And that project was over 10 years ago now, and still people are doing it. And I really think that if I had stopped with just this one person saying to me, you don't have that expertise, and I said, in the end, it didn't matter that I didn't have the expertise. Someone else in this group of the 100 people we were working with, many of them had that, and I don't need to have the expertise in every area. So that's one challenge. Another challenge that we have that I faced is, I think maybe that's because I was saying at the beginning that when we do this work in the development sector or human rights, you have lots of passionate people. And we join organizations and we work with these organizations. And sometimes our values stop being aligned with the organizations that we're working with. And that can be a challenge. And that can be destabilizing. And sometimes that means that we have to make changes. And for me, as a risk-averse person, I hate change in this way. And I love stability and I love being in control of things. But in this situation, I remember someone saying to me, don't be attached to an organization. Don't be attached to a project. Be attached to a cause, because that cause can never disappoint you. And that means your values are always aligned with that. And I think that when you have that liberty to say, I'm no longer attached or linked or married to a specific organization, but to a cause, it frees you up as a professional to work in lots of different areas where you can work on the cause that you're really passionate about and are then able to make a difference. And I'm really, really grateful that this cause of children's rights and the particular children's rights that we're working on are so passionate that I don't think that I will ever stop working in this area, but not necessarily always for the same organization. So working in this sector on children's rights and sometimes in the development sector, I think as a woman, the biggest challenge for me, not the biggest, but one of the main challenges has always been finding the right balance, between your professional obligations, but also your personal obligations, family obligations, but not just obligations, but they're not just obligations, they also bring me lots of joy, these obligations. And working on children's rights, I always try to say to the younger generation of females coming up, remember that if you work on children's rights, don't forget your own children, because often it's so demanding and you don't even think it's work because you're so passionate about working on these issues that you forget that, hey, but there are little ones or even older ones at home and their children, and they also have rights. And so that balance of knowing how much to work and how little to work and how much time to spend at home with the little ones, that's always been something that as a family, we're always adjusting. And it's not something that now, so at the beginning when the children were really young, I only really worked very little because I wanted to be at home. And it changes so quickly and they're no longer babies. They no longer smell like babies. And I didn't want to miss that. But now that they're older, it means that for me and for us as a family, I can work more. That might be different for other women, but for us as a family, that has been a challenge as a woman. I wanted to be mother hen, but I also wanted to work on children's rights and I didn't want to miss it. And what I now I can say after, like I said, over 20 years of working on this, the children's rights issues, they're always going to be there. I didn't miss out on anything, but what I think I will regret in the future, if I hadn't spent as much time as I did with the kids, is my children are not always going to be children, and I would have missed out on their developmental milestones, taking them to school, being home with them, and finding that balance is not easy, but it's doable. And I think everyone has to find the right balance for them. But I think for a woman, it's particularly challenging. So at the moment, as everybody knows, we're 2025, and I think that I have never, ever seen the development sector in such a crisis due to the funding. And I think that commitment of states to funding developmental work that promotes human dignity, these fundamental human rights, I think that's a really difficult era that we're entering into, or it's been there already, the shrinking space of human rights. I would love that to change. I would love people to understand once again why we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, why there is this human dignity, why we are equal in all. I would hate to think that we're going to go backwards and not learn the lessons that we learned after the First and Second World War. But it seems that as humans, we're not learning what we could have and should have, because we see genocide happening in different country contexts. We see famine. We see such extreme violations of children's rights and we seem to not affect us. And I think that I would love to see people remember again that we're all equal, that every child deserves their rights to be respected, whether they're in country A or country B. We're all humans, and we should have all our rights respected. I would love also to see states have that political will to respect those children's rights and human rights, but particularly children's rights, because if we get that wrong, we get not only because they're part of now, but I'm not quite sure we want the future that we're investing in. We're not investing in something that is going to be a pleasant place to live in if it's okay to contravene human rights. And if I can prioritize something, and I will, it would be the child's right to identity, the right to have a birth certificate, the right to have a nationality, the right to know who their family relations are, because it will get lost. Because these types of rights you only realize when you're much older. You don't realize as a baby that these rights have been violated, and no one's speaking up on behalf of you at this newborn stage. And it's really when you're much older that you realize, oh my goodness, this is affecting me now. The fact that I don't have a birth certificate means I can't go to school, or I don't have a nationality means that I can't get employed. So it's only much later you see the effects, but we can prevent this if we get it right at the beginning. And so I would love states to work on that, to remember that there are these promising practices, to look around. There are so many good examples of what states are doing to protect human rights, but not to slow down and not to get numbed by the fact that this is normal. To remember that we want the best for us, we want the best for our children, we want the best for society, and we can only do that if we are all on an equal footing and human rights are our foundation. I think for me, the way I stay hopeful is because that, yes, we can all be very selfish as human beings, but inside us, we were all created in a way to know fundamentally deep down, we're all human beings. We're all created the same. We're all created equal. And if we remember that, then I think that we will do what's right. Because when we remember that it's not right to steal, it's not right to kill, then we will not have these violations that we see. And I'm hopeful in humanity that it's not dead, that it's still alive in all of us, this inkling that what's right is always going to be right in these situations. If I can say two women that have inspired me in humanitarian type work The first one would have to be Maud de Biccuccio. She's the president of Child Identity Protection. She's already in her 80s and she's still going. She has more energy than I have, but she was the first woman Deputy Secretary General of the Council of Europe in 2001. So she was the very first, and she led the way for so many women in this male-dominated space to show that women can reach the highest levels in a human rights context. And what I love about her is that she's been so willing. I think it's been nearly a decade of her mentoring me. And I love that she's mentored me. And the reason why in a humanitarian context, she's not been afraid to call black, black and white, white. She's not afraid of states. She just calls it as it is. And so if you look at, for example, when she was the UN Special Rapporteur on sale and sexual exploitation, she went to Nigeria. She spoke to the girls that had been violated by Boko Haram. She went to, when the Ukraine war came out, she was there on the border watching the children be taken from Ukraine into Poland. And for me, she shows me that there is no age limit. It's her passion that drives her to protect children in all these different settings. And that's her Northern Star. It's putting children first. And I see it in the way she acts. And I've seen it in the way she's mentored me. And I really just think she's such a great role model for many, many, if I can't say hundreds, but maybe even thousands of women. Then the second person for me that is also another mentor, but probably more recent, is Anne Skelton. So Anne Skelton is just recently finished her mandate of being the UN Committee on the Rights of Chairperson, UN Committee on the Rights of Children chairperson. And for me, I'm doing my PhD with her at the moment and Ton Lyford at the University of Leiden. But the way she also interacts with states and has been doing this when they examine states' parties, she led the very first press statement against Israel and what they were doing for children in Gaza and calling it what it was. And that was already a couple of years ago, whereas other people in her position wouldn't have the courage to do that. Then if I look at what she was saying to states also for the children that are born in northeast Syria and that are detained in the detention camps, she was telling the receiving states, Belgium, France, Germany, Switzerland, listen, you have an obligation to repatriate these children. And she's received much criticism for these types of positions that she's made. But she's saying, but this is right according to international human rights law. This is right according to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And I just love her courage and her intellectual integrity. I mean, she's brilliant. And I love that she's been so willing to share that knowledge with the younger generation. So when she's supervising a few of us doing her PhDs, and she's so willing to spend and teach and to give us some of her knowledge, and hopefully so that we can continue the work with her. And I really admire these two women as being, it's such a privilege to be working with them and to learn from them.